The room froze when billionaire Elias Monroe shouted his desperate promise. "Whoever makes my baby walk gets my company." The crowd laughed, thinking it was another display of arrogance. But when Maria, the quiet maid who loved his daughter like her own, whispered something that silenced everyone, everything changed. That night, a miracle no one believed in began to unfold, and it had nothing to do with money. The night glowed with champagne and tension. Elias Monroe's mansion pulsed with laughter, crystal clinks, and the soft rhythm of a live jazz band echoing through the marble hall. Waiters in white gloves floated like ghosts carrying trays of gold-rimmed glasses. The crowd of executives, investors, and their polished spouses looked like a magazine spread, every smile too perfect, every laugh a little forced. Elias stood among them, motionless, the picture of wealth and control. But behind those sharp gray eyes was exhaustion, the kind that even billions couldn't fix. Earlier that day, another specialist had left his house shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Monroe. We've tried everything. Your daughter's legs show no neurological response." Elias had simply nodded, as if he were receiving quarterly losses instead of heartbreak. He had built Monroe Dynamics from nothing, conquered markets across 3 continents. But in 2 years, he hadn't conquered a single smile from his daughter, Lily. She was perfect, his late wife's eyes, her curls, her quietness. But she couldn't walk. She could barely stand without trembling. Doctors said it wasn't physical. "She just doesn't try." That phrase haunted him. How could a child not try to live? Tonight, the launch of his new medical tech division was supposed to be a distraction. Instead, as glasses clinked and toasts rose, he felt like a fraud celebrating progress while his own daughter sat upstairs unable to take a step. Maria Alvarez stood quietly at the far end of the room, near the service door. She wore a simple black uniform and carried herself with the kind of grace that goes unnoticed until it's gone. Her job was to refill glasses, clear plates, and stay invisible. But she had been more of a mother to Lily than anyone since the girl's birth. She had seen Elias bury himself in meetings, seen him lose the ability to hold his child for more than 5 minutes. To Maria, this man who could buy anything looked like someone who had nothing left. She caught glimpses of him that no one else did. The trembling hand that lingered over his wedding photo, the rare whisper to his sleeping child, "I'll fix this. I swear." By the time the clock neared 11, Elias had drunk enough bourbon to quiet the ache in his chest. He stood, commanding the attention of the room with the ease of a man used to owning it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice steady, eyes glassy. "Thank you for being here to celebrate another victory for Monroe Dynamics." Applause rippled through the crowd. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We've built machines that can repair hearts, restore sight, replace limbs." But, he paused, his voice cracking slightly. "I can't fix my own daughter." Nervous laughter flickered, uncertain whether to react. "She's 2 years old and hasn't taken a single step. We've had doctors, specialists, therapists, nothing. So tonight," he raised his glass higher, "I'm making a promise. Whoever gets my little girl to walk, gets my company." The silence was absolute for 3 long seconds before the laughter began, soft at first, then spreading like wildfire. The CFO chuckled behind his hand. A group of engineers smirked, whispering jokes about miracles and stock options. Elias's jaw tightened, but he didn't take it back. He wanted them to laugh. Let them. Maybe mockery would make the universe notice. Then, through the laughter, a voice came from near the back of the hall. Calm, feminine, clear. "Maybe she doesn't want to walk for strangers." The room froze. Heads turned. Maria stood with her tray pressed to her stomach, eyes steady on Elias. Every gaze snapped between them like an electric current. The music had stopped without anyone noticing. Elias blinked, as if unsure whether he'd heard correctly. "What did you just say?" His tone sliced the air. Maria didn't flinch. "Maybe she doesn't want to walk for strangers, sir." The word sir didn't sound submissive, it sounded human. Real. Some guests gasped softly. Someone near the bar muttered, "She's out of her mind." But Elias didn't shout, didn't dismiss her. He just stared. There was something unsettling about the quiet conviction in her eyes. The kind of truth that people in his world forgot existed. "Get back to work," one of the supervisors hissed at her. Maria nodded, lowering her gaze and slipping toward the service door. But Elias's voice followed her. "Maria," he said, and the entire room tensed. "Stay." The guests tried to act casual, but curiosity hummed in the air like static. Elias set his glass down with deliberate calm and smiled. A sharp, humorless curve. "You think love replaces science?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I think love is where healing starts," she replied softly. A ripple of whispers followed. Elias's eyes narrowed, but not in anger, more in disbelief. For a moment, it looked like he might laugh again. Instead, he said nothing. He simply turned away, murmuring something to his assistant before walking toward the grand staircase. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she returned to the kitchen. The other maids avoided eye contact, some shaking their heads. "You're crazy, Maria," one whispered. "You'll be fired by morning." Maria didn't answer. She went straight to Lily's room. The child was awake, sitting in her crib, eyes wide open as if she had heard everything through the floorboards. "Hi, Angel," Maria whispered, sitting beside her. "Couldn't sleep?" Lily reached her arms toward her, the same way she always did when frightened. Maria hummed the lullaby that had become their nightly ritual, a melody from her own childhood in the countryside. Slowly, Lily relaxed, her tiny fingers tracing the maid's face. One day, Maria whispered, "You'll walk. But not because someone forces you. Because you'll want to." Downstairs, Elias paced his office like a caged animal. The liquor on his breath mixed with regret. How could a maid humiliate him in front of hundreds? But the more he replayed her words, the harder it was to dismiss them. Maybe she doesn't want to walk for strangers. Was that what he'd become to his own daughter? A stranger with her last name? He stared at the glass wall separating his office from the hall beyond, where laughter had returned, fragile and fake. For the first time, the sound sickened him. He pressed a hand to his chest, suddenly aware of the emptiness there. Hours later, long after the guests had gone, Elias climbed the stairs toward the nursery. The house was silent except for the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. He opened the door quietly. The room smelled of baby lotion and lavender. Maria sat on the floor beside the crib, her head tilted back against the wall, humming softly as Lily slept curled in her arms. The moonlight through the curtains painted them both in silver. For reasons he couldn't explain, Elias felt his throat tighten. He should have been angry. Instead, he stood there, motionless, watching. Maria looked up, startled to see him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Monroe," she whispered, beginning to rise. "I didn't mean to overstep." "Don't," he interrupted, voice low. "Don't apologize." He took a slow breath, eyes fixed on his daughter. "Do you really think that's why she doesn't walk?" She hesitated. "I think she's scared, sir. Children sense things. They don't need words to feel when love is distant." Elias said nothing. He turned toward the crib, resting his hands on the railing. "Her mother died bringing her into this world," he said quietly. "Maybe she knows that." Maria's eyes softened. "Or maybe she's waiting for her father to hold her without guilt." He turned sharply, but there was no accusation in her voice, only gentleness. The kind that disarmed him completely. For a moment, they just stood there, the silence heavy but not hostile. Then Lily stirred, mumbling something in her sleep. Elias's hand brushed his daughter's hair. It was the first time in months he'd done that. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Maria," he said without facing her, "be in my office tomorrow morning." And before she could respond, he was gone. Maria exhaled slowly, unsure whether she had just sealed her fate or changed it. The only sound was the rhythmic breathing of the child in her arms. She looked down at the sleeping girl and smiled faintly. "Looks like tomorrow will be interesting, little one," she whispered. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, the first sign of an approaching storm, one that would soon test the limits of pride, love, and redemption inside the Monroe mansion. The morning sunlight slipped through the tall windows of the Monroe estate, laying golden stripes across the marble floor. The house was quieter than usual, as if it were still holding its breath after last night's scene. Maria woke before dawn, as she always did. Her small room in the servants' wing was simple, a single bed, a wooden dresser, a faded photograph of her parents taped to the mirror. She sat at the edge of the bed for a moment, rubbing her tired eyes. Last night's words echoed in her mind, that sentence she hadn't planned, the one that left the whole mansion in silence. Maybe she doesn't want to walk for strangers. She hadn't meant to challenge her employer in front of everyone, but sometimes truth slips out before fear can stop it. Maria sighed, smoothed the bed covers, and tied her dark hair back into a braid before heading to the kitchen. The staff whispered when she entered. Everyone had heard what happened. The cook gave her a sympathetic look, while the younger maid, Sophia, shook her head. You shouldn't have said that, Maria. He's not the forgiving type. Maria smiled faintly. I know. Do you think he'll fire you? Maybe, she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. But I'd rather lose my job than keep quiet when it's about that little girl. She glanced toward the ceiling, where Lily's room was. She doesn't deserve to grow up surrounded by silence. Sophia didn't answer. She'd worked here long enough to know that silence was how the Monroe family survived. A knock echoed from the hall. The butler appeared, straight-backed and unreadable. Mr. Monroe wants to see you. Now. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she set down her cup. She wiped her palms on her apron, took a steady breath, and followed him through the corridors. The house looked different in daylight, still magnificent, but somehow colder. The walls were lined with portraits of ancestors, serious men in suits and women with distant eyes. At the end of the corridor, the butler opened the door to Elias Monroe's office. She's here, sir. Elias's voice came from behind the desk, quiet but sharp. Thank you, Richard. That will be all. The door closed. Maria stood there, unsure whether to approach. Elias didn't look up right away. He was staring at a photograph on his desk, a younger version of himself with his late wife, her belly swollen with pregnancy. When he finally looked up, his expression was unreadable. Sit. She obeyed, hands clasped in her lap. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt heavy, charged with something more than anger. You embarrassed me, he said finally, his tone controlled but hard. I know, sir. In front of investors, clients, people who keep my company alive. Do you have any idea what that means? It means they saw a father desperate enough to bargain with his child's condition, she answered softly. His eyes flashed, but she didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. You think you understand my life? My daughter. I understand pain, Mr. Monroe. Maybe not yours exactly, but enough to recognize it. He frowned. You've lost a child? Her throat tightened. Yes. Years ago. My son. He was sick. We couldn't afford treatment. I promised I'd do everything for him, but love wasn't enough. When he died, I stopped talking for a long time. It took months before I could sing again. But when I finally did, I remembered that love is not about fixing. It's about staying. Her voice wavered at the edges, but her gaze stayed steady. Something shifted in Elias's face. His anger faltered, replaced by something uncertain. You think staying will make her walk? He asked. Maybe not, Maria said. But it will make her want to. He stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, the estate's gardens stretched in perfect symmetry, trimmed hedges, marble fountains. All control, no warmth. You talk like it's simple, he murmured. It's not simple, she replied. But it's human. He turned, his voice lower now. Do you know what it's like to lose everything you love because of a single moment? Because you couldn't protect them? Maria looked up. I know what it's like to lose. But I also know what it's like to live with guilt until it eats you alive. It never ends unless you let someone in. The room went quiet again. The only sound was the faint ticking of the wall clock. Elias sat back down slowly. His voice softened, barely audible. She used to smile when she heard my voice. Now she turns away. Because she feels your sorrow, Maria said. Children are mirrors, Mr. Monroe. They show us the parts we try to hide. He stared at her, speechless for a moment. He was used to negotiations, debates, stock reports, logic, but not this. Not someone who spoke to him like he was still human. He rubbed his temples. You're not like the others, he said. You're not afraid to talk to me. I'm afraid, she admitted. But fear doesn't stop me from caring. Just then, the door creaked open. A small voice whispered, Papa? Lily stood there, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She wore her tiny pink pajamas, curls wild from sleep. Elias froze. It had been months since she had entered his office without being carried. Lily, he said softly. You should be with Maria. The child hesitated, her big brown eyes darting between them. Then she toddled forward on her knees, dragging herself until she reached Maria's leg. She tugged on the maid's sleeve. Song, she murmured. Maria smiled, lifting her onto her lap. She began to hum the same lullaby from the night before. The melody filled the office like a prayer, gentle and alive. Elias watched, unable to move. Lily's tiny fingers played with Maria's necklace, her face calm and content. It struck him how natural it looked, how much his daughter trusted this woman, how safe she felt. When the song ended, Maria whispered, "See. She listens when the world is quiet." Elias swallowed hard. "You really think she understands that?" "I think she feels it," Maria said. "And feeling comes before everything else." She stood carefully, still holding the child, and placed her in Elias's arms. He stiffened instinctively, as if afraid she might break. "She won't," Maria said softly. "She just needs you to stop being a stranger." For the first time, Elias didn't hand Lily back immediately. He looked at his daughter's face, her small hand resting on his shirt, her steady breathing. Something inside him cracked, something that had been locked away since the day his wife died. "She looks like her mother," he whispered. "Yes," Maria said. "And she looks like you when you smile." He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. Lily's head tilted against his chest, eyes fluttering shut. When Maria turned to leave, he said quietly, "Thank you." It was the first time he had said those words to anyone in years. Later, as Maria walked down the corridor, her heart raced, not from fear anymore, but from a strange hope. Maybe she hadn't ruined her life last night. Maybe she had cracked something open in his. She paused outside Lily's door, listening. Inside, Elias's low voice murmured to his daughter, awkward but tender. She smiled to herself, wiping away a tear she didn't expect. That night, the mansion was silent again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. There was something warmer beneath it, like a faint heartbeat returning after too long. And upstairs, in a nursery filled with moonlight, a father sat beside his sleeping child, whispering stories he hadn't told since his wife's last breath. Down the hall, Maria lay awake staring at the ceiling, unsure of what tomorrow would bring but certain of one thing. Love had just entered that house again, and it wasn't leaving quietly. Before we go on, I want to know what you think. If you were in Maria's place, would you have spoken up to a man like Elias in front of everyone, or stayed quiet? Tell me in the comments below, and while you're at it, give this story a rating from 0 to 10. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you're enjoying it. Your support keeps stories like this alive here on the channel. Days began to move differently inside the Monroe mansion, though no one dared to say it aloud. Something in the air had softened, as if Maria's words had loosened a knot that had been choking the house for years. Elias kept his distance at first, still wrapped in his routines, but his eyes followed Maria and Lily more often now. He would stand at the doorway during therapy sessions, his arms crossed, pretending to observe like a boss supervising a project. But his gaze betrayed him. He wasn't watching the exercises. He was watching the warmth that flowed between them. The doctors came and went, bringing charts and jargon, leaving behind the same hollow reassurance. "Progress takes time, Mr. Monroe." He nodded, always nodding, but his patience was running thin. Then he would catch sight of Maria sitting on the rug afterward, building towers out of blocks with Lily, humming under her breath. The towers always fell, and both would laugh. The laughter felt like sunlight after a storm, even if Elias wouldn't admit it. Maria never tried to replace the specialists. She just gave the child something they couldn't measure. She read fairy tales aloud, her voice alive with emotion, even giving the dragon and the princess different accents that made Lily giggle uncontrollably. Every night, she carried that joy with her back to her small room, exhausted but peaceful. Yet not everyone in the house shared her calm. Among the staff, whispers grew louder. Some servants admired her courage, others called her foolish. "The boss looks at her differently now," one said near the pantry. "He never looked at anyone like that." "Please," another scoffed. "She's just the maid. He's a millionaire. Don't romanticize it." But gossip is a seed. It grows even when you don't feed it. Soon, stories spread beyond the staff, reaching ears that could twist them. One afternoon, as Maria was preparing Lily's lunch, a voice sliced through the kitchen. "You're getting too comfortable." It was Diana, the senior housekeeper, tall and sharp-eyed. "Excuse me." Maria turned, startled. "You think we don't notice? You walk around here like you're the lady of the house now." Maria froze, clutching a spoon. "That's not true, isn't it?" Diana smirked. "The way he defends you, the way he lets you speak to him, no maid gets away with that. You should remember your place." The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because Maria had already asked herself the same question in secret. She turned back to the stove and said quietly, "My place is wherever Lily needs me." Diana gave a cold laugh and left, but her words lingered like smoke. That evening, Elias came home earlier than usual, which startled everyone. He walked straight past the foyer, ignoring the staff's polite greetings, and headed toward the nursery. He stopped at the doorway, unseen for a moment, watching. Maria was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, with Lily leaning against her, drawing on a large sheet of paper. "That's the sun," Maria said softly. "And what's this?" "Mama," the girl said, pointing at a stick figure beside it. Maria froze. Her throat tightened as she met Elias's gaze across the room. It was the first time Lily had called anyone that word. He stepped closer slowly, his voice quiet. "She called you." "She just said what she felt," Maria interrupted gently, afraid to make it sound bigger than it was. But he could see tears in her eyes, even if she tried to hide them. Later that night, when Maria was tidying the nursery, Elias came back. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before speaking. "The staff's been talking," he said. "They think you're crossing boundaries." She looked up sharply. "If my care for your daughter makes them uncomfortable, I can leave." He frowned. "That's not what I want." "Then what do you want, Mr. Monroe?" she asked, her voice steady but weary. He opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. He was a man who could command hundreds, close billion-dollar deals, yet now words failed him completely. "I just want her to walk," he said finally. "And she will," Maria replied. "But only when this house stops feeling like a battlefield." That night, he couldn't sleep. Her words followed him like an echo through the hallways. A battlefield. Was that what he'd built here? He thought about his wife again, how full of laughter she'd been before the pregnancy, how everything had turned gray after the birth. He had turned cold, robotic, believing control was the only way to survive grief. But Maria's presence had cracked that armor. He hated how exposed it made him feel, and yet, for the first time, he didn't want to seal it back up. A few days later, he arranged another medical appointment for Lily, this time with a high-profile neurologist from Boston. Maria waited outside the consultation room as Elias discussed test results. When the doctor emerged, his expression was gentle but firm. "Your daughter's body is healthy. Her muscles are fine. But she's emotionally withdrawn. She doesn't trust new people. She needs stability, not experiments." Elias looked down at the folder in his hands. "You mean I've been?" The doctor smiled faintly. "You've been trying too hard. Let her feel safe. That's where healing begins." When they returned home, Elias didn't speak during the car ride. Maria sat beside Lily, who dozed in her car seat. As the car turned onto the long driveway, Elias finally said, "He said what you said." She smiled softly. "Then maybe you should listen." He didn't respond, but his jaw unclenched for the first time in weeks. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Elias joined them for breakfast. He didn't eat with the staff, never had, but today he sat at the kitchen table where Maria fed Lily oatmeal. The other maids froze, unsure how to behave. "Good morning," he said awkwardly. Lily looked up at him, blinking. "Morning, Papa." He smiled, genuinely smiled, and the air in the room changed. After breakfast, he stayed while Maria played with Lily, awkwardly participating, holding blocks, laughing at her tiny mispronunciations. The staff whispered again, but this time it wasn't out of malice, it was disbelief. The man they thought made of stone was learning to bend. That evening, Maria stood at the window of her small room, watching the sunset spill across the gardens. For the first time since she came to the mansion, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, belonging. But that peace was short-lived. As she turned from the window, she noticed an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a short note in unfamiliar handwriting. "Careful, Maria. Not everyone wants the little girl to get better." Her heart pounded. She looked down the hallway, but it was empty. She folded the note and tucked it away, deciding not to tell Elias. Not yet. Maybe it was just gossip turned cruel. But somewhere deep down, she sensed it wasn't. Downstairs, Elias sat in his office, staring at a photo of his wife again. But this time his thoughts were different. He didn't feel only guilt now. He felt something new, something like gratitude. He whispered to the empty room, "Maybe she's right. Maybe love really is where healing starts." Upstairs, Maria sat beside Lily's bed, stroking her hair until she fell asleep, unaware that both their lives were about to change again, and that the walls around them, walls built from grief, pride, and fear, were finally beginning to crumble. The rain began as a whisper against the glass, faint and steady, almost soothing. By nightfall, it turned into a full symphony of thunder and wind, hammering the walls of the Monroe mansion. The storm outside mirrored the quiet tension inside, the kind that comes before something changes for good. Elias was in his office again, staring at the financial reports he had read 3 times but hadn't absorbed a single word of. The numbers swam in front of his eyes, irrelevant next to the memory of his daughter calling Maria mama. He rubbed his temples, trying to chase away the unease that had been living inside him since that day. The air smelled of rain and old wood. Lightning illuminated the room in flashes, and for a second, he saw his reflection in the window, a man haunted not by failure, but by emptiness. In the nursery down the hall, Maria was singing softly while folding Lily's tiny clothes. The child was restless, stirred by the storm. Every time thunder cracked, she whimpered and reached for Maria's hand. "It's just the sky talking, sweetheart," Maria whispered. "Nothing to fear." She hummed again, her voice steady and warm, wrapping the room in calm. The lights flickered once, twice, and then the power went out completely. The house plunged into darkness. For a moment, silence. Then the echo of wind through the old corridors. Maria reached for a candle, lighting it with a match from the nightstand. The soft glow painted her face in gold, and she smiled to reassure Lily. "See? Light always finds its way back." Downstairs, Elias cursed under his breath as everything went black. He found a flashlight in his desk and stepped into the hallway. The house looked different without light, longer, emptier, as if every shadow carried its own secret. Somewhere in the distance, he heard the faint sound of humming. He followed it, up the grand staircase, past the portraits that now looked like ghosts in the flickering beam of his flashlight. When he reached Lily's door, he stopped. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, Maria sat cross-legged on the floor, Lily tucked against her chest, both illuminated by candlelight. The lullaby drifted through the air, soft and hauntingly familiar. Elias leaned against the doorframe, watching quietly. The storm outside roared, but inside that small circle of light, everything was peaceful. Lily's eyes were heavy with sleep, her fingers tangled in Maria's braid. Elias felt something twist inside him. It wasn't jealousy, but a deep ache, the realization that he had never been able to give his daughter this kind of comfort. He stepped inside, and Maria looked up, startled. "Mr. Monroe, I didn't hear you come in. Didn't mean to scare you," he said, lowering the flashlight. "The power's out all over the estate. I wanted to make sure you were both all right." "We're fine," she said softly. "She's calmer now." He nodded, his gaze fixed on Lily. "She's not afraid of the thunder anymore?" "Not when someone's here to tell her it's okay," Maria replied. For a while, neither spoke. The candlelight danced across the walls, throwing warm shadows that made the nursery look almost alive. Elias sank into the armchair near the window, still watching them. "You always seem to know what to say," he murmured. "I just listen," Maria said. "Children tell you everything if you pay attention to what they don't say." He leaned back, eyes unfocused. Her mother used to say things like that. Maria's hands stilled for a moment. "You miss her." "Every day," he said quietly. "She was strong, like you. Kind. But after Lily was born, something in her changed. She blamed herself for every struggle the baby had. And when she got sick, I blamed myself for not seeing it sooner." His voice cracked slightly, the first fracture in the wall he'd built around his grief. Maria didn't interrupt. She just let the silence breathe between them until he continued. "When she died, I promised I'd give Lily everything. Money, care, safety. But I think I gave her a cage instead." The words hung in the air. Maria's eyes softened, reflecting the flickering candle. "You can't heal what you never let yourself feel, Mr. Monroe. You've built walls around both of you, but she can't walk through walls. She needs open doors." He looked at her, genuinely seeing her for the first time, not as an employee, but as someone who carried wisdom carved out of her own pain. "And what about you, Maria?" he asked. "Who helps you open your doors?" Her smile was small, bittersweet. "I keep them open by helping others. It's the only way I know how to keep breathing." A loud thunderclap shook the windows, and Lily stirred, murmuring softly. Maria began to hum again, the same tune as before. This time, Elias recognized it. "That song," he said quietly. "My wife used to sing it too." Maria blinked, surprised. "It's an old lullaby from the South," she said. My mother used to sing it to me. Maybe your wife knew it too." They exchanged a look, and for a moment, the storm outside didn't exist. Only the rhythm of the song and the faint sound of rain. As the night deepened, they talked in low voices while Lily slept between them on the floor. Elias spoke of his work, the endless pressure, the constant need to prove himself. Maria spoke of her son, the illness, the poverty that took everything except her will to keep living. In the soft candlelight, confessions became easier, words falling naturally into the quiet. "Do you ever stop blaming yourself?" Elias asked at one point. "Some days," she said. "But guilt is like rain. It doesn't stop because you want it to. It stops when the storm runs out." He looked at her for a long time. "And you think mine will?" "Only if you stop feeding it." The candle had almost burned down when Lily stirred again. She rolled over, pressing one tiny hand against Elias's arm. He froze, his eyes wide. It had been months since she'd reached for him. Maria whispered, "She knows you're here." He placed his hand over hers carefully, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Then, in the faint light, they both saw it. Lily's leg twitched slightly, just enough to shift her weight. It was small, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. Maria's eyes widened. Elias stared, his breath caught. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "But don't rush it. Let her rest." He nodded, though his heart was racing. They sat in silence again, both staring at the sleeping child, the storm outside finally beginning to fade. The thunder grew distant, the rain softening to a steady drizzle. Elias leaned back, exhausted but strangely lighter. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "Maybe love really does fix more than medicine." Maria looked at him, her face calm but her eyes shining. "It doesn't fix," she said. "It heals." When the lights finally flickered back on, the house seemed different, less imposing, more alive. Elias looked around as if seeing it for the first time. He stood, stretching, and glanced at Maria. "Get some rest," he said. "You've done enough for tonight." She nodded, gathering the blanket around Lily. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Maria," he said softly, "thank you." She smiled faintly. "Good night, Mr. Monroe." As the storm faded completely, the first hint of dawn crept into the sky. The world outside glistened with fresh rain, and inside that quiet nursery, a small child slept peacefully between two people who, without realizing it, had both begun to heal. For the first time in years, Elias walked down the hall without the weight of grief pressing against his chest. Somewhere deep inside him, something had shifted, something irreversible. And though he didn't yet know it, the miracle he had begged the world for was already beginning to bloom. The days after the storm carried an unfamiliar stillness through the Monroe mansion, the kind of peace that follows long chaos. The power had returned, the staff resumed their routines, but something invisible had shifted. Elias woke earlier now, not to check stock reports or answer calls, but to hear the quiet hum of life returning upstairs, the sound of Maria singing, the soft laughter of his daughter. Each morning, he lingered at the foot of the stairs before walking to the nursery, unsure if he was intruding or finally coming home. What surprised him most was how natural it felt to be there, to sit on the rug and watch them. Lily seemed different since that night. She smiled more, her eyes brighter, her tiny hands steadier when she played. There was still a fragility in her movements, but beneath it, a determination he hadn't seen before. Maria had noticed too. "She's trying," she whispered one morning. "Something's waking up inside her." Elias didn't answer. He didn't want to hope yet. Hope was dangerous. It hurt when it broke. The following week, he canceled 2 board meetings and postponed a business trip, a decision that startled his assistant. "You're skipping the investors' luncheon?" the man asked in disbelief. "Yes," Elias said simply, "family matter." The assistant blinked, uncertain whether he'd heard right. But Elias didn't explain. He was tired of explaining himself to people who measured time only in profit. That afternoon, he joined Maria and Lily in the sunroom. It had become their new therapy space. Large windows, warm light, and a garden view that shimmered with color. Maria spread a soft blanket on the floor and placed Lily's favorite toys in a circle. "Let's make a fort," she said cheerfully. Lily giggled and began stacking blocks while Elias handed over pillows and watched her tiny hands work with focus. When a tower fell, Lily frowned, then rebuilt it. "That's my girl," Maria said softly. "Never gives up." Elias felt something rise in his chest, an ache he hadn't felt since his wife's laughter filled these halls. He sat beside them, cross-legged like a student. Maria noticed the change in him, the softer edges, the patience in his voice, the way he looked at his daughter not with frustration, but wonder. She caught his gaze and smiled faintly. "You see," she whispered. "She just needed to feel safe. And I needed to learn how," he murmured. It was a small sentence, but it carried years of silence inside it. Over the next days, they built a rhythm. Maria handled the play sessions and gentle exercises. Elias handled the rest, reading stories, feeding Lily, even tucking her in. Each night, when he sang softly beside her crib, his voice cracked, rough from disuse, but Lily didn't seem to mind. The staff watched in astonishment. Whispers that once carried venom now carried awe. "He's different," someone said. "Have you seen him smile? He looks happy. Or maybe human," another added quietly. Maria heard the rumors, but ignored them. She wasn't doing this for anyone's opinion. It wasn't about admiration or gratitude. It was about a little girl learning to trust her world again, and a father learning to deserve her trust. Then came the afternoon that would change everything. It was a Saturday, warm and bright after days of rain. Maria was sitting with Lily on the carpet, arranging wooden blocks into a long path. "We're building a road," she said. "Where does it go?" Lily pointed toward the window. "To the flowers." Maria laughed. "Then let's make sure the road takes us there." She looked up. "Mr. Monroe, would you hand me the red block?" Elias smiled, handing it over. He sat down beside them, close enough for Lily to reach him. She grinned, tapping the blocks together in rhythm. The lullaby that had become their anthem drifted softly from Maria's lips. Then, in the middle of that peaceful moment, something small but extraordinary happened. Lily shifted forward, pushing herself up on her hands. Her legs trembled as she pressed her feet against the rug. Maria froze, her voice fading mid-song. Elias stopped breathing. "Lily," Maria whispered, barely a sound. The child wobbled, one tiny hand reaching toward Maria. Then, one step. It was clumsy, shaky, fragile, but it was real. A step, then another. Her toy rabbit slipped from her grip as she stumbled forward, falling into Maria's arms. The world went silent. Even the ticking clock seemed to stop. Elias stared, his heart pounding in his ears. "Did she just—" "Yes," Maria said, her eyes filling with tears. She walked. For a second, no one moved. Then Lily laughed, a high, bright sound that shattered the silence. She clapped her small hands and pointed at Elias. "Papa, look. I did it." The words hit him like a wave. He fell to his knees beside them, pulling her close, his voice trembling. "You did it, sweetheart. You did it." He pressed his forehead against hers, tears running freely now. Maria sat beside them, her hands shaking. The door had been opened just enough for Richard, the butler, to see everything. He stood frozen, eyes wide, then slowly smiled. Within minutes, the news spread through the house like wildfire. Cooks abandoned their stations, maids peeked down hallways, and for once, everyone shared the same emotion, pure, unfiltered joy. Elias lifted Lily in his arms, spinning her once before catching her carefully. "You did it," he repeated, laughing through tears. Maria wiped her face, still unable to believe what she had witnessed. "She was ready," she said quietly. "She just needed to feel loved." Elias turned to her, his expression shifting from joy to something deeper. "No," he said, shaking his head. "You did this. You gave her back her strength." Maria shook her head quickly. "No, Mr. Monroe. I only reminded her what love feels like. The rest was hers." But he didn't look away. There was gratitude in his eyes, and something else, something that frightened her more than anger ever could. It was understanding. He lowered his voice, almost a whisper. "You don't know what you've done for me." She met his gaze, her own trembling. "I didn't do it for you," she said softly. "I did it for her." He nodded slowly, accepting that truth. Still, the weight of his promise echoed in his mind like a bell. "Whoever makes my baby walk, gets my company." The words that had once been drunken despair now stood before him as a living reality. He looked down at Lily, standing unsteadily but proudly beside Maria, her small fingers gripping the edge of the couch. Elias felt his throat tighten. He had everything money could buy, but at that moment, he realized none of it compared to this. That evening, the mansion glowed with quiet celebration. There was no party, No announcements, just warmth. The staff gathered discreetly, clapping when they saw Lily take another shaky step between Maria and Elias. Even the old walls seemed to echo with laughter that hadn't been heard in years. Later, when the child finally fell asleep, Elias stood at the window, looking out at the moonlit gardens. Maria joined him, her voice low. She's going to walk everywhere soon. You'll see. I already do, he said. He turned toward her. Maria, I meant what I said that night. Her heart skipped. About your company? She asked. About promises, he said quietly. Some are made in anger, but some are meant to be kept differently. Maria didn't answer. She could see the weight of meaning behind his eyes, the gratitude he didn't know how to put into words. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Monroe, she whispered. You already gave me back something I thought I lost, a reason to believe again. He smiled faintly, looking down at his sleeping daughter. You're wrong, he said. I owe you everything. As the clock struck midnight, a soft wind rustled through the open window. The scent of rain still lingered, sweet and fresh, like renewal. Down the hall, Lily stirred in her crib, murmuring in her sleep. And though neither of them spoke another word, both knew that something sacred had happened that day, something beyond science, beyond logic. It wasn't a miracle born of chance, but of love, patience, and the courage to believe again. And as Elias closed his eyes, he whispered to the quiet room, maybe miracles don't come to those who have everything. Maybe they come to those who finally learn how to give. The morning after the miracle felt unreal. Sunlight poured into the Monroe mansion as if the universe itself had decided to celebrate. The usual stiffness that defined the house was gone. The walls, once heavy with silence, now carried laughter and soft footsteps. Elias woke to the sound of his daughter's giggles echoing through the hallway. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. But when he walked into the nursery and saw Lily standing, wobbly but proud, his heart swelled in his chest. She looked up, her curls catching the morning light, and said, Papa, watch, before taking another uneven step toward him. He crouched down, arms open, unable to speak. When she fell into his embrace, everything he'd lost, the hope, the warmth, the sense of being a father, rushed back all at once. Maria stood by the doorway, watching quietly, her hands clasped together. She had seen miracles before, in small moments, like the way a broken heart still beats, but never something like this. Elias turned toward her, eyes wet, and for the first time since his wife's death, he didn't hide his emotion. She's walking, he said, his voice trembling with disbelief and joy. She's really walking. Maria smiled softly. Yes, she is. She just needed to remember that she could. He nodded, holding Lily close, overwhelmed by something deeper than gratitude, a sense of rebirth. Word of the event spread quickly among the household. By midday, every employee had heard about it, and the mansion buzzed with a quiet excitement. Even the groundskeepers seemed to move differently, lighter, as if hope itself had seeped into the air. But not everyone's reaction was pure. In the corners of whispered conversation, some still muttered about promises, about the drunken declaration Elias had made weeks earlier. He said he'd give his company to whoever made her walk, one maid whispered. Does that mean? Don't be ridiculous, another scoffed. He'd never hand over an empire to a maid. Yet despite their doubts, curiosity burned. That evening, Elias sent word for all employees to gather in the grand hall. When Maria received the message, her heart sank. She feared it was about her. Perhaps gossip had gone too far. Perhaps people thought she was after something she never wanted. She tried to calm her nerves, straightening her uniform before stepping into the hall. The chandeliers glowed above, and the staff lined the marble floor, murmuring among themselves. At the far end stood Elias, tall and composed, his daughter sitting on a small cushioned chair beside him. Lily swung her legs happily, unaware of the tension that filled the room. When the murmurs died down, Elias stepped forward. I asked you all here, he began, because I made a promise. Many of you were there that night, when I said something reckless and foolish, something that came from despair, not reason. I said that whoever made my daughter walk would inherit my company. The crowd exchanged nervous glances. Maria felt her stomach twist. Elias continued, his voice steady but warm. That night, I was a man lost. I thought money could buy miracles. I was wrong. He turned to look at Maria. The miracle that happened in this house was not bought, it was born. It came from patience, kindness, and love. From someone who gave my daughter what I couldn't, hope. The silence in the room deepened. Maria lowered her gaze, wishing the ground would swallow her. Elias smiled faintly. Maria Alvarez, he said, and all eyes turned to her. You reminded my daughter how to live. But more than that, you reminded me how to be human. For that, no fortune could ever repay you. Still, a promise is a promise. So today, I will keep mine, just not in the way anyone expects. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Elias gestured for his assistant to step forward, holding a folder embossed with gold lettering. As of today, Elias said, we are establishing a new initiative, the Lily Steps Foundation. It will provide therapy, education, and support for children with mobility challenges, families who can't afford the help they need. And it will be named in honor of the woman who inspired it. He turned to Maria. You, Maria, will lead it. You'll have your own team, your own staff, your own home if you choose. And it will be funded indefinitely by Monroe Dynamics. For a moment, Maria couldn't breathe. The room erupted in quiet gasps and applause, but she stood frozen. Mr. Monroe, I don't know what to say. He stepped closer, smiling gently. Say yes. She shook her head, tears welling up. I don't deserve this. You deserve more than this, he said softly. You gave my daughter her life back. You gave me mine. Lily clapped her tiny hands, laughing. Mama Maria, you're happy now. The crowd laughed through their tears. Maria covered her face, overwhelmed. She had come to this mansion as a maid with a broken past, never imagining she would become the heart of its healing. After the meeting, as the crowd dispersed, Elias found her standing by the large window overlooking the garden. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, the sun setting gently behind the trees. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. I would have stayed here just the same. I know, he replied. That's exactly why I did it. They stood side by side, watching the evening descend. After a long pause, Elias spoke again. You once told me love doesn't fix, it heals. You were right. My daughter's legs healed, but so did something else. The part of me I thought died with my wife. Maria looked at him, her eyes soft. And what will you do with it now that it's alive again? He smiled faintly. I'll try not to waste it. Outside, the first stars began to appear. Lily's laughter floated down the hallway as her nanny chased her playfully. Maria listened, her heart full. She turned to Elias. Do you ever think about how strange life is? How the people meant to save us sometimes arrive when we least expect them? He nodded. Every day? And sometimes they don't save us. They remind us that we can still save ourselves. Their eyes met for a long moment before she looked away, a small, knowing smile on her lips. I should check on Lily, she said. She'll be showing off her steps all night. Go, he said, smiling. She's earned this celebration. As Maria walked down the corridor toward the sound of laughter, Elias remained by the window, watching the world outside darken into peace. He could see the reflection of the house behind him, no longer the cold fortress it once was, but a home reborn from ashes. When he finally turned to leave, he passed the framed photo of his wife on the hallway wall. For the first time in years, he didn't feel guilt when he looked at it. Instead, he whispered, She's walking now. And so am I. In the nursery, Maria lifted Lily onto her lap, rocking her gently as the child's eyes began to close. You did something amazing today, little one, she whispered. You showed everyone that love can move mountains. Lily murmured sleepily. Mama, will you stay forever? Maria smiled, brushing a curl from her forehead. As long as you want me to. She kissed her on the forehead, humming the same lullaby that had once carried both of them through the darkness. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, gentle and kind. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, Elias stood in his office, signing the official papers for the foundation. When he was done, he set down the pen and looked toward the ceiling, a small smile playing at his lips. For the first time, his promise had led to something more than regret. It had led to purpose. In that moment, he finally understood what Maria had been trying to teach him all along. Miracles don't happen when we demand them. They happen when we stop running from love. And as the moonlight poured through the window, Elias whispered the words he once swore in pain, now reborn in truth. Whoever makes my baby walk gets my company. He smiled and added softly, and my heart thanks her for it.